Lady Gaga has been having the year of her life between releasing her long-awaited Chromatica Ball movie, performing at the Olympics, starring in her latest film Joker Folie Deux as the iconic Harley Quinn, and scoring her latest top 5 hit with Bruno Mars on Die With a Smile. It's clear that she's head and shoulders above her contemporaries of the late aughts. Adding to her victory lap is a surprise record, Harlequin, which she considers to be LG 6.5, a bridge to her new record set for February 2025. Harlequin is a collection of songs sang in Joker 2, as well as 2 original songs from Gaga herself. She hinted at the album in June of last year on Instagram while editing her Chromatica Ball film, and also by showing pictures of her in the studio. She would formally announce the album after a series of teasers and billboards. As something of a companion record to the film, there was also a short teaser set in the Louvre. The album's aesthetic is mystifying, featuring Gaga in a short orange hairstyle in a filthy apartment. It evokes the grimy aesthetic of the movie that it's based on. As for the music itself, it is an unapologetic jazz album, much in the vein of Gaga's earlier records with Tony Bennett. Fans waiting for Gaga's return to avant pop, you guys are just gonna have to wait a little longer. Still, on a vocal level, Gaga's never been this unrestrained and free. I feel like she's really perfected her delivery. The Joker is a personal highlight of her stylized skill. For this video, I'm breaking convention because I did want to discuss the 2 original pieces first and foremost, and then cover the tracks, and of course assign a score to the record. But before that, some general notes. Harlequin's extremely well produced. Majority of the production was done by Lady Gaga herself and Benjamin Rice, who's notable for his work on movie soundtracks. Both impeccably create beautiful cinematic music. This is an album that was made to be played on vinyl. The rich analog nature of this thing might not appeal to the girls and the gays, but I do see some older traditional folks really digging this. I have yet to see the movie. I plan to see it really soon. I think that the film will add context to these tracks, but it's nice to have copies of the song without Joaquin Phoenix's vocals. I'm sure that Joaquin is fine in the film, but these are solo Gaga versions of classics across time. The emotions of Gaga's vocals really make these tracks sing. Cover albums tend to live and die by delivery, and Gaga really hits each note with feeling. I do think this is probably what she is most passionate about on top of her pop work. You can tell that she was really having fun making this record, and this wasn't some side cash grab project that she needed to finance a house or a boat with. Her fiancé Michael Polanski oddly has a few credits on some of the songs, which is interesting. She recently credited Michael for her return to pop music in an interview. Harlequin also marks Gaga's first release under her Little Monsters LLC, implying that she owns the masters to this album and whatever albums that she's gonna make, so forth. Okay, so here's my chief criticism of this record. It tends to be how uneven the track listing is. The first half, while solid, actually pales in comparison from the run of tracks from Smile towards That's Life. Though if the album's mission statement is to musically explore her interpretation of Harley Quinn's mind and her emotional range, then the album is very successful. At its very worst, it's actually pretty cloying and a little too reverent, but at its best, it's a sharp reminder of Gaga's vocal talent, and again, a solid launchpad for her upcoming 7th record, which I believe will veer back into her weird, wild pop sensibilities. This is more or less her just scratching an itch. Now onto the original tracks. There are 2 originals on here, Folie Deux and Happy Mistake. Folie Deux is this original waltz, very clearly inspired by the events of the film. It opens with Take My Hand, Stay My Friend, which directly references Joanne's title track. But then the song goes into a romantic ode towards 2 people who share madness but are crazy in love with each other. Gaga sounds absolutely delightful on this track. I could see this being a song that Harley and Joker would waltz to as they try to make sense of the world around them. The vocal bridge is magical. I've heard reports that the song is not in the movie itself, which makes it ineligible for any Oscar nominations, which is a shame because I feel like this would be a lock for a nomination in Best Original Song. The second new track is Happy Mistake, which was made just for this album. It is a showstopper of a ballad that is produced by Blood Pop. This one feels like a return to her Joanne writing style from a meta perspective of herself and Harley. It's this really gutting track about the price that you pay for having a persona, hearing her sing about how if she ever thought that she would find lasting joy, it would feel like a mistake. That in itself is very heartbreaking. In relation to her Harley, this track informs us how this version is a performer who walks the line between tragedy and comedy, but is always willing to take the risk even if it means falling into one of those buckets. I can definitely see why Interscope is pushing this as somewhat of a single from this album. I'd love to hear this one on tour if she does tour for LG7. Now on to the covers themselves, which for the most part are great reinterpretations of the classics. With Good Morning, we can imagine this being the start of Harley's day. It's very obnoxiously joyful and boisterous. Each of the verses speak to her obsession with Joker, loving him from afar. Verse 2 focuses on her trying to steal time away into the day, speak late into night with him. Gaga really embodies the mania of someone who's made it her mission to love someone and make that their whole living. Get Happy 2024 implies that there should be another version at some way down the line, but this one's pretty great. It was first teased in the trailers for Joker 2. Gaga imbues this with a continued sense of euphoria. In the context of the movie, Harley's likely celebrating the day that she and her lover get to create chaos and liberate the masses. Joker has this messianic complex that Harley really feeds into, and she plays the part of a devoted follower, ushering people to follow her leader into the Judgment Day. Gaga's interpretation vocally yet again is immaculate. She detours briefly towards gospel sounds, as she previously played with earlier in her career with Oh When the Saints, which some have memed due to the song's usage in the show That's So Raven. Again, this ties into Harley's almost religious love for Joker's philosophy. I think that this is her peak mania. I need to shout out the production because it's so well calibrated and thought out. Gaga and Rice really make it sound full. World on a String is a guitar-focused cover. It's probably one of my favorite covers on the record. I found it to be a bold reinvention of a classic while retaining its charms. When the drums kicked in, it really does transform into something that feels different, but also familiar. The recording feels very modern, but also from the past. I think there's a nice timeless quality to it. It really reminded me of Brown Eyes off her debut. She's always had that feel to her work. If My Friends Could See Me Now is Gaga's full jazz transformation. It opens with this slow fake out, then the band comes in. I can imagine this being a moment for both Joker and Harley to realize they're at the top of their story. But when Gaga scats on this, I feel like she's flexing a little for herself. There's a certain infamous Facebook group that comes to mind when I think of this one, and well, Stephanie Germanotta did end up being famous. That's Entertainment caps off the first half, and it feels most directly connected to the movie. In the context of the film, I feel like that's the ethos for the film's musical nature. It's very classic Hollywood and likely the reality that the film occupies for our leads who think that they are the stars of this big musical movie. Gaga channels her absolute best, classic glamorous Hollywood self as she rips through each line and sings with a smile. The big band arrangement works best here. Gaga is in her element on this one. It's show-stopping. Smile is another well-calibrated cover that's tender and speaks to the delusions of Joker very well. Gaga holds a candle to Nat King Cole, never quite imitating her, but rather paying solid tribute. I feel like the French interlude in the middle of the song caught me by surprise, but it adds a classy air to the cover and differentiation before she wraps it up with the heartbreaking final chorus. The Joker, though, is the best cover on this album. It's this delightful reinterpretation of Anthony Newley's work that's actually close to Shirley Bassey's legendary cover from the 60s, but it's definitely its own beast. The rock sound is something that I've always wanted Gaga to outright explore. The ambition on this track rivals the heights that she reached during Born This Way, which for many years was one of my favorites of Gaga's. Gaga channels the lamentation and torment of the song's narrator. The Joker's Me perfectly ties into the characters of the films. They're underlings of society doomed to be laughed at, who still dream of striking at the very top. Gonna Build a Mountain is another gospel standard that Gaga absolutely eats up. This one feels more realized than the Oh When the Saints cover came on earlier. Gaga's soulful vocals and the organ, they don't feel performative at all on this one. There's a looseness to this recording. I love that you can tell that Gaga's just vibing. The final chorus on this one might contain some of her career best vocals. Close to You is a cover of a song that was made popular by the Carpenters, and while it's not quite as good as the original in my opinion, Gaga's interpretation is very charming. I think that in the context of the movie, it's a loving little song about Harley's obsession with Joker. I'd say that the production on this one outshines Gaga just a little bit. When the horns come in, it adds a really fun vintage air to the song. I feel like the vocals are just a little too polished on this take, like the emotion gets washed out a little bit despite Gaga sounding technically immaculate as per usual. The final cover is That's Life, which ends the record on a beautiful note, and I imagine this might be the final song in the movie. Gaga really evokes Sinatra the best she can. The lyrics, I imagine, capture the rise and fall of Joker and how he keeps rolling with the punches, and the chorus itself is kind of funny because it could actually apply to Gaga herself. She's been everything up and down, and yet she always gets back in the race. We are still here more than 15 years after the fame, and she's still a superstar where some of her fellow stars have moved on to different avenues from the pop star game. Gaga is no stranger to a flop era. Art pop essentially rendered her persona non grata for many years, but she evolved into a world-class performer who can sell out a jazz residency and a stadium tour in the same year. I think this record actually went #1 in 40 plus countries. Regardless, Harlequin is a fun little break before Gaga spreads her wings next year. Whomever is left to release music after this stacked year, you better prepare yourselves for a knife fight at the Grammys, especially if LG7 is that album. I am more than glad to give this a solid 7.6 out of 10. I'm not a jazz fan, but I'm definitely a little monster. And that's a wrap. Oh my god, I covered 2 albums in the span of a week, but this one was a surprise. I just felt like I needed to cover it. It's kind of ironic I was recording this while I was working on the Fame Monster redo, which is still coming, guys, which is still coming in due time. I want to give a shout out to my members. Thank you so much for supporting this channel, and a big shout out to my subscribers. Thank you for staying with me. Comment below what you felt about Harlequin, what your favorite tracks were, if you're going to go see the Joker movie on opening night, what you think that movie's going to do. I love reading the comments and responding to you guys, and I will see you next video.